Does anyone actually buy secondhand furniture from Marketplace or Gumtree? We couldn't get rid of our solid timber dining table that had nothing wrong with it. It was just too big for the space that we have. Then I realised I'm a man with tools and I can make it fit. Here is how I upcycled our old dining table for a better life. I started with the tabletop since it seemed like the most important part. The intention was to reduce both the length and the width to better fit our space. And I decided to cut off both sides of the tabletop, measuring from the centre so that I wouldn't have to strip the stain from the edges. Conveniently, one of these offcuts was perfect for making this shelf from my last video. Then it was time to strip the finish from the top surface of the table using this timber stripper. I found this old slapper of a paintbrush and covered the tabletop, pouring the whole container out and spreading it around. I was hoping to get a time lapse of the stripper eating away at the top coat, but there was no bubbling at all and I was concerned that it wasn't working. I left it for however long it said to and got out the scraper and hoped for the best. It did seem to work fairly well, getting rid of the finish coat and some of the stain underneath that. Went back over it with a bit more pressure and took off more of the stain, but I could see a whole lot of sanding ahead, and I was left with this gross tub of sludge for my troubles. The apron needed some modification, so it was taken apart to be cut to size. It was all held together with these little diagonal pieces that the legs also screwed into. They didn't need to be changed, so I put them in a container with all the screws I'd taken out. The horizontal members had these Z brackets that slotted into a channel on each member, and they all had to come off too. Instead of using that stripper again, I set up the table saw and skimmed up a small amount of the outside face, just enough to reveal the bare timber underneath. The legs received the same treatment, first skimming 2 perpendicular faces on each leg, then adjusting the saw slightly to treat the remaining 2 faces. Then there was sanding, sideways sanding, long way sanding, diagonal sanding, sanding the apron, sanding the legs, orbital sanding, wipe sanding while I'm having a beer. That's my favourite one. And stay tuned for more sanding later. Aside from cutting down the tabletop, the apron needed to be resized to fit the new dimensions. I screwed it back together to better visualise how I'd need to cut it down. I didn't really need to do that since I knew it just needed to be shortened by the same amount as the tabletop, but the extra time taken helps to prevent mistakes, since my mind is often 3 weeks and several miles away. Once I'd reconciled that fact in my brain, I made the cuts taking 400mm from the length and 200mm from the width. The parts have a V notched out of them to fit the diagonal joiners, and so they need to be reproduced at the cut end. I transferred the outline to where it needed to be, and out came the chisels. Doing this job with this dodgy setup had me dreaming of a better way to facilitate my woodworking adventures. But that's a job for future Nick. Back to reality now. The diagonals were tested for fitment, and all 4 pieces of the apron received the same treatment. Then I brought out the trim router. I put a 5mm round over on all the edges of the tabletop after testing on a piece of scrap. The apron pieces received the same round over on their bottom edges, and the legs got it on the bottom and sides. And then, would you believe, more sanding. Before I could get to the most satisfying part, that is rubbing on a coat of oil, the table needed to be put back together. The apron was simple enough, I just had to make sure they were up the right way, since the tabletop would be secured with the original Z brackets that tucked into the narrow slot on the back of each apron piece. Once I'd found the setback measurement for all sides, I screwed on the first bracket to the apron, and after double checking its position, screwed it to the tabletop. It was all pretty straightforward after that, screwing more brackets on and rechecking that everything was where it should be. There were a couple of cross braces to contend with, and then finally the legs were screwed on. Jade wasn't convinced that I'd tried hard enough to sand the residual stain out of the tabletop, so she commandeered the DA and had a crack at it, until realising that it just wasn't going to budge. It was late afternoon and I'd already cracked a beer. The last job of the day was to rub on the first coat of Danish oil, so it had the 8 hours it needed to dry before recoating in the morning. The next day brought with it one last round of sanding and the final coat of oil for our table. And we're done. The table works so much better in the space that we have. There were some spots of stain in the timber that wouldn't come out, but I'm going to call it character and move on with my life. We're very happy with our upcycled table, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching to the end, I really appreciate it. If you liked the cut of my jib and reckon I deserve a beer for my troubles, check out my PayPal link in the description to make a one-off donation. Also, if you're in the market for some decent camera gear, click my affiliate link with Neewer and check out their wares. Here's cheers.